Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Driving the Future of Sustainable Apparel Education. My name is Tasha Lewis, and I'm a professor in fashion and retail studies at The Ohio State University, and I will be the host for this session. It is wonderful to have fellow educators joining us today. We know you are all dedicated to preparing the next generation of industry leaders to champion ethical and environmental sustainability. And we are excited to explore how we can do that more effectively together. And before I begin, I would also like to take a moment to allow my fellow ESRAP colleague, Connie Elasowicz, to speak a bit more about the organization and to also let our other ESRAP leaders introduce themselves. So Connie, I'll pass it on to you.
Thank you, Tasha. So ESRAP stands for Educators for Socially Responsible Apparel Practices. Originally in 1999, when we began, we were ESRAB with a B at the end. I'm not one of the founding members, but I had joined pretty close to that period of time. Originally, we were through the International Textile and Apparel Association. And we, in I can't remember how many years ago, it seemed that many of us were wanting to do this outside of that organization, and that's where we are now, and we have a LinkedIn site. Our mission is still, as Tasha had said, to be a collaborative learning community whose members collectively share knowledge, application, and experience while building awareness and fostering community engagement around the social and responsible textile practices. So my name is Connie Elasowicz. I am a professor emeritus from San Francisco State University, and I'm turning it over to Andrea.
Thank you so much, Connie. Hi, everyone from New York. My name's Andrea Kennedy. I'm chair and lead for the Fashion Merchandising and Management Department at Berkeley College. Also excited for today as we are Cascale members, and I'm a huge Higg fan and user, and think that both of these companies are really important to when you're educating for a socially responsible, just, and equitable future of fashion. Thanks. And Virginia.
Well, it was actually supposed to be a new, but I'll jump right in. Hi, I'm Virginia Noon, and I'm a faculty member at the Fashion Design and Retailing Department at Framingham State University. And we're a state university just west of Boston. So I will then go back to Anu. Thank you all for joining.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anu Pasricha. I am professor of fashion at St. Catherine University, and the department is Fashion Design and Merchandising. I'm also serving as the President Senior Fellow for Leadership Integration at my institute. And like Andrea, I've had the early opportunity to work with Higg Index when it was in its pilot testing stage many, many years ago. And I'm also a huge fan. So I'm excited today what we have on the docket here. So let's get started.
So thank you, Connie and Anu, Virginia, and Andrea. So we are all here today because we like to dive deeper into the tools and intelligence shaping today's apparel supply chain. And to help us navigate this, we are thrilled to feature two expert speakers who are at the very center of industry-leading sustainability efforts. First, we have Rachel Lincoln Sarnoff, the Director of Communications at Cascale, and Charlie Gustafson, Product Marketing Manager at Worldly. So thank you both for joining us today. And without further ado, Rachel, I will start sharing my screen so that we can begin your presentation. So give me 1 second and we should be all set.
Thank you all so much. And thank you everyone who's joining us virtually, and ESRAP in general. Thank you for having us. Okay, so we can go to the next slide. And this is my daughter. So when I first became a mom, I thought I was doing everything right. And it wasn't until my third child, and this is her, Chloe, that I understood the impact that industries like fashion had on the world she would one day inherit. So the next slide, please. So that's when I started leading and communicating social and environmental impact strategies for systems change. I worked on legislative projects and encouraged consumer advocacy, and I met a lot of like-minded people. Next slide, please. Okay, including a king. Although at that time he was still a prince, but yes, that is him. So this is the next slide then. And I'll just pause, maybe Tasha, if you want to forward them. They're pretty quick. So this is an educated group, right? And we know that fashion is powerful. The fashion industry is valued at more than $1.7 trillion. The fashion value chain employs 300 million people. And we know that it can be harmful. So textile and apparel production is responsible for as much as, and we know the statistics, the analysis does vary, but as much as 10% of the world's carbon emissions. And conversations about these challenges often end with this question: how can we fix the system? And I found answers at Cascale. So Cascale's story began just after my daughter was born. In 2009, Patagonia and Walmart were both working on sustainability, and they realized that they were each measuring their work differently. So it was apples to oranges. They needed a common metric. I love that. I don't know who said that, but that was exactly the reaction I was looking for with my AI generated images here. They needed a common metric of apples to make it apples to apples. And so together they convened a group of industry stakeholders and built the Higg Index tools. So we'll start with the product tools. These are the Higg Materials Sustainability Index, the Higg MSI, and the Higg Product Module, referred to as the Higg PM. These assess the environmental impact of producing materials and products. Next are the facility tools, like the Higg Facility Environmental Module, or the Higg FEM, and the Higg Facility Social and Labor Module, or the Higg FSLM, which assess the social and environmental impacts at the facilities that produce materials and products. And then finally, the Higg Brand and Retail tool, the Higg BRM, assesses the environmental and social impacts, sounding familiar, of brands and retailers that sell products. So the idea was to use these tools to facilitate pre-competitive collaboration in order to decrease environmental impact and increase social justice in the fashion industry. And the nonprofit Sustainable Apparel Coalition was founded to achieve these goals. But a decade later, the Higg Index tools were being used for more than just apparel, and the SAC had outgrown its name. You can see the categories we work in now: apparel, textiles, and footwear, sporting and outdoor goods, home furnishings, bags and luggage. So in 2023, I joined to help rebrand the organization to Cascale, which means collective action at scale. And today, Cascale represents roughly half the apparel industry by revenue. Our Higg tools are used by more than 40,000, and our members are in 33 countries. These are brands, retailers, manufacturers, and affiliates, including academic institutions, which is well represented here. We utilize a data-driven approach powered by the Higg Index to deliver measurable progress, catalyzing impact across the global value chain, to realize, back up one more, and one more back. Yep, to realize, it's just the next one from here. To realize our vision of a global consumer goods industry that gives back more than, that gives back more than it takes to the planet and its people. So the next slide now, please. A few years ago, the team managing the Higg Index spun off to become Worldly. You're going to hear more about that from Charlie in our second presentation. So Worldly is now the leading supply chain sustainability data insights platform. You can see kind of how it breaks down here with a lot of words, which I know is hard in a presentation, but basically Cascale owns the Higg Index, which is exclusively available on Worldly. And next slide, please. Together, Cascale and Worldly empower collective action across the consumer goods industry to combat climate change and support decent work for all. So these are our two big pillars that we're working under as an organization, meaning Cascale. So the next slide, please. So what does this look like? So to support decent work for all, we champion workers' rights, ensure fair purchasing practices, and streamline audits to foster safe and equitable workplaces. And to achieve these goals, we can go to the next slide. Our tools include the Higg FSLM, which we just talked about, which is built on the Converged Assessment Framework, or CAF, of the Social and Labor Convergence Program, or SLCP. We really love acronyms at Cascale and in this industry, as you know. So SLCP was initially incubated by Cascale, which is a little bit of context for that connection. And then last year, we acquired better buying tools and methodologies, including the Better Buying Responsible Purchasing Practices surveys, which deliver anonymized data to help brands and retailers better understand the needs of manufacturers and suppliers. Next slide, yes. So switching gears to our second pillar, to combat climate change, we catalyze collective action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by addressing energy transitions, foundational environmental performance, and supply chain decarbonization. And the next slide, please. Our members are on board. 67% of Cascale members have set or begun the process of setting their science-based targets, SBTs, or science-aligned targets, SATs. And next slide, please. In 2024, we released analysis of Higg FEM data that showed 10% of facilities, now this is at that point 1,800, we have narrowed it slightly since then, but 1,800 in 9 countries, and these are primarily wet processing. And these account for 80% of emissions in the textile and apparel supply chain. So this data, this data makes a clear case for where those improvements that I referred to in the previous slide can drive the most impact. Next slide, please. And we continue to update and share data analysis through reports and other initiatives that show clear opportunities to connect brand commitments with manufacturer action. Next slide, please. We welcome Cascale members and non-members alike to the Manufacturer Climate Action Program, which is called MCAP. This is This is an 18-month program that helps manufacturers develop and validate their SATs and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. You could just leave it here. To date, MCAP has engaged 85 manufacturers with 8 sponsoring brands. And this is a fairly new program. I think we're in our second year. 49 of those targets have been validated, representing a collective reduction potential of over 1.4 billion metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. So this is roughly equal to taking 300 million cars off the road for a year. Next slide, please. We also help scale collaborative climate action programs, including the GIZ PDP solar rooftop initiatives in critical manufacturing regions of Bangladesh, Cambodia, and Vietnam, as well as AII environmental improvement programs, and then collective work through Fashion Leap for Climate. Next slide, please. But change at this scale doesn't happen with just a handful of organizations, and that is why our work includes targeted advocacy. We bridge the gap between industry stakeholders and policymakers, focusing on education rather than lobbying. And we continually update the Higg Index to help companies respond to emerging regulations like the EU's Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, or CSDDD, or CS3D, depending on which acronym you're using, which entered into force in 2024. And all of this is connected through the Source of Good podcast, which I host, which I am honored to host. And I wanted to share the promo with you for our current season, season 3, which is actually out now. So if you could play that, Tasha, that would be awesome.
On Source of Good, we talk with brands and manufacturers about how they're making their products better for the environment, better for people, and better for our future.
We are now investing in Sri Lanka further in a new mill. It's going to be a state-of-the-art fabric mill in Panala. It's not just another mill. It's going to be designed to be a beacon of sustainable innovation.
A lot of the land has been depleted through overgrazing. The land is severely degraded. So our wool supplier works with their network of farmers to promote responsible grazing with the sheep from whom the wool comes. And so more carbon is sequestered in the soil.
It's an amazing thing that we take for granted in the apparel and footwear industry in particular, that the Higg FEM Index even exists where everyone inputs their data. Without the data, we can't do what we do at RAN.
Whilst people will argue today that everyone is still most sensitive about the price, if you were presented with the same product, with the same price, but one had a worse environmental impact, then you'd gravitate to the better product.
How do we manufacture the products in a way that is sustainable, that we don't have a net negative impact on the ecosystem and on the environment? I think we're a lot further along than we have been in the past.
We're all in it together. How are we going to hold each other accountable? But accountable not in a way that's punitive, and accountable in a way that doesn't look like there's this power dynamic that's not appropriate for the suppliers being able to drive their own vision and direction.
Season 3 of Source of Good comes out soon. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
So season 3 of Source of Good is out. In fact, all 3 seasons are on, you can find them at cascale.org or on YouTube. You can go to the next slide. But season 4 is coming out next month. And I would love for you all to listen and subscribe and tag me with any questions. It's been an honor to talk to our members and stakeholders about this work. So thank you all so much for your time. I'm excited to stay connected, and I will pass to Charlie.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Rachel, for that powerful introduction to Cascale and our shared mission and the broader sustainability ecosystem that we're a part of. But I think I'll have my slides pulled up here in a second. But for the next 20 minutes or so, I just want to give a quick deep dive on how Worldly brings some of these principles to life and really empowers our customers to unify trusted data from across the supply chain and turn it into intelligence that drives measurable impact as well as business value. Really quick, my name is Charlie Gustafson. I'm a product marketing manager at Worldly. And similar to Rachel, my journey into this ecosystem really began with recognizing the symptoms of a struggling planet in my day-to-day life and understanding that systems change and collective action was needed to right the ship. So I began my career bouncing back and forth between being a raft guide on the Colorado River and then working at data and technology companies during my off seasons. But after spending years witnessing the decline in health of the ecosystems and canyon systems that I cherish, became particularly motivated to devote my career towards catalyzing positive impact for people and planet. And with a background in data and technology, really no better place to go than Worldly. So as Rachel mentioned, Our two organizations were once one with roots in managing the Higg Index from the beginning, but the demands of managing and activating these shared standards across our ecosystem required that we develop very sophisticated software solutions that could scale globally. So that's where Worldly comes in, and we can go to the next slide. So at Worldly, when we talk about environmental and social impact, both in fashion and apparel, but then also in the broader consumer goods industry, we really see that pressure is growing from consumers, investors, and then also regulators to prove positive impacts and responsible sourcing practices, and also to better understand risks deep within the supply chain, particularly in tier 2, 3, and 4, as this is where the majority of emissions, water use, labor risks typically occur. But those parts of the value chain are often fragmented and outsourced and hard to see into. So again, like Rachel mentioned, with all of these emerging regulatory frameworks like the EU's CSDDD, Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, or CSRD, we do love acronyms like ESPR, ESRS, all of these acronyms representing different frameworks that really require companies to provide detailed environmental and social data, not just within their own operations, but across their entire value chain. So in short, demand for credible supply chain data has never been higher. Now we can go to the next slide. And yet, when we have conversations with sustainability leaders and practitioners all across the world, we hear the same thing over and over again, that they're attempting to gain this visibility, but they're drowning in data that they may be collecting via spreadsheets, that they're sending emails to their supply chains, trying to get in touch with their extended value chain and getting all of this data back, but still don't have the insights they need to drive meaningful change. And that's highlighted by some of the statistics on this slide. The lack of a shared standard makes for a very challenging ecosystem when trying to interpret all this data that you're ingesting. But on the other hand, suppliers are also very overwhelmed. They're asked to fill out sustainability performance assessments in different formats for different brand customers with no coordination. And it's inefficient, it's frustrating, and it doesn't leave any time for driving meaningful progress. So you'll see here on this slide that even among companies with very strong sustainability programs, 87% say that data quality is a top challenge. They also report that 1 in 4 consumer goods businesses are actually reporting on supply chain emissions, so scope 3 emissions. And again, that point about the lack of industry standards. Without the shared standards and verified data, everyone's stuck reacting to requests as opposed to driving that improvement. So we can go to the next slide. And to solve all of this data chaos, companies need more than just data collection. They need intelligence built on standardized, verified primary data. So Worldly, along with Cascale and the Higg Index, brings together environmental, social, labor, chemical, and even climate risk data in one consistent framework. We specialize in engaging and collaborating with supply chain entities, collecting verified performance data through standardized assessments like the Higg FEM and FSLM. I'll try to not use acronyms, Facility Environmental Module and Facility Social and Labor Module. Then using that data to uncover critical insights that support continuous improvement. It's verified, it's comparable, and it's benchmarkable. And with this proven process, you can spend less time as a brand or a retailer chasing supply chain data and checking for accuracy, and more time making progress on initiatives, engaging stakeholders in critical business decisions, again, for that end goal of driving continuous improvement. Now, in addition to Cascale membership, Cascale members get access to Worldly tools, obviously the Higg Index, amongst others. We work with many of the world's leading consumer goods companies, including brands, retailers, manufacturers, individual facilities, and then also academic institutions. Worldly customers are seeing faster reporting cycles, stronger supplier engagement, and measurable improvement over time. And it's not just in apparel and fashion, but it's across the consumer goods industry. You'll see here on this slide some examples like Denelm, which is a furniture brand out of the United Kingdom. Black Diamond is specializing in sporting and outdoor goods, mostly, apparel and also equipment. And then also multi-category retailers like Target, you'll see on that middle column. But 9 of the 10 largest US apparel manufacturers rely on Worldly. 7 of the world's 10 largest sportswear brands also use Worldly, and 7 of the 10 biggest trend-driven fashion companies rely on Worldly for supply chain data as well, just to speak to the power of our ecosystem. Now, because Worldly, along with Cascale, has so much experience with establishing and activating these shared standards, we've been able to scale and build really a quite large network of suppliers and verified supply chain data. You'll see these statistics on this slide that in 2025 alone, we've seen around 65,000 assessments completed through our platform. That equates to about 5,000 daily active users and 100,000, actually over 100,000 assessment shares across the network. So the scale, the engagement, it really drives better data quality, better efficiency, and better progress across the entire ecosystem. And large networks like these, this collective action, it's what makes sustainability performance measurable, comparable, and valuable for decision making. I also want to emphasize that we do not exist in this ecosystem alone. Obviously, you heard from Rachel about the nature of our partnership and some of the other entities that we work with, but all of the entities together provide, I guess, a system that allows for data that you can trust. In collaboration with Cascale and the Social and Labor Convergence Program, or SLCP, we work with over 500 verifiers globally, and today around 60% of our facility assessments on the platform are verified. And that matters because it means that brands and suppliers can trust the information that they're using to make decisions, comply with regulations, and report to stakeholders. And again, we don't do this alone. We work closely with other technology partners that help bring our software solutions to life, other multi-stakeholder initiatives that foster pre-competitive collaboration in sub-industries within the consumer goods industry, like the European Outdoor Group or the Outdoor Industry Association, among many others. We also work with facility advocate entities to ensure alignment across the value chain. If we go to the next slide, it's very central to just our business model that suppliers are supported throughout every step of the way. So you'll see that on the supplier side, when suppliers are receiving requests to submit data and purchasing assessments and filling out assessments, we have a very, very high supplier completion rate, meaning that they're completing their assessments and submitting their data to the ecosystem. And that's because of all of the resources that they have available to them throughout the process. They have access to over 60 online courses every year. Those are self-paced, self-guided courses, as well as 80 live webinar trainings to ask live questions and answers, along with 24/7 support and on-platform AI assistance to help provide guidance on how to answer each specific question in a facility assessment. And then there's also a facility ownership of data, which is really important, that they have the power to complete one assessment and share it with as many partners that they choose to share it with. But that data does live in ownership with the facilities. And now, the real power of Worldly comes from how all of the pieces fit together in one single platform that's built for action. You'll see on the left of this slide that the primary data piece and the data collection is at the heart of the system, and then it can be used across all of the other areas that Worldly supports on our platform. For example, social and labor performance and environmental performance can be mapped against a brand or a retailer's internal code of conduct to ensure that their supply chains and their suppliers are in compliance with their internal standards. Also identify opportunities for improvement and collaborative action. We also have the product impact suite, which includes the Higg MSI and PM. I am going to try not to use acronyms, the Higg Material Sustainability Index and the Higg Product Module. The Material Sustainability Index and Product Module, again, they evaluate the impact of products and materials across every life cycle stage And actually, many of our academic institutions that we work with use the Higg Material Sustainability Index as both a research tool and a learning resource, allowing students to gain, direct experience with an industry standard methodology for modeling material impacts and understanding, material sourcing decisions and sustainable material selections for products. And then one of our new solutions, the Product Impact Calculator, allows brands and retailers to model Scope 3 emissions efficiently and at scale using industry averages, and then bring that primary facility and materials data layer in for greater emissions accuracy and then proving decarbonization progress. We also have the insights and actionability column there, you'll see. After collecting all of your data, these are centralized locations. The Insights Hub is a centralized space for benchmarking, filtering, identifying trends across your supply chain, identifying areas of improvement and action. And then Worldly Axion, an even newer solution, goes a step further by combining facility level data with external indicators like water stress, energy intensity, even policy risk to help companies predict future vulnerabilities and make determinations about where to act and where their actions will have the greatest impact. And throughout the platform, all of this is supported by AI-driven assistance, education, world-class support, and it's all embedded throughout the platform. Great. So wanted to give a couple practical examples of using primary data across our platform and the value that it brings to consumer goods, brands, and retailers in our ecosystem. So imagine that you're a brand or a retailer and you're evaluating the risk profile of your suppliers, trying to understand how to minimize supply chain disruptions. If you have a facility in Bangladesh, for example, which produces much of the world's apparel and textiles, you may be looking at a supply chain risk from a macro view using third-party data sets. Looks like Bangladesh is at high risk of water stress exposure in the next 3 to 5 years. That means due to water consumption, drought, and other weather, there may not be enough water for facilities to operate, and that would cause supply chain disruptions. Having primary data from facilities changes your view of risk and could lead to different decisions that you would have made only relying on macro data. So data from Worldly would show you that this specific facility that you're evaluating is using recycled water or gray water, putting the chance of disruption much lower. Or you also might see that this facility is using much more water than average, putting it at a higher risk than you might have originally thought. And on the next slide, we can take a look at this primary data integration from a product angle. Let's say you're evaluating the impacts of one of your products and you do a product carbon footprint for a carbon t-shirt. As a starting point, you may want to rely on what's called a spend-based calculation using just a generic emissions factor based on the cotton weight. You may be overestimating or underestimating the emissions of that t-shirt because you're just relying on averages. So next, you try to enhance the accuracy of this calculation by identifying the country where this shirt comes from. You may be using a generic grid emissions factor for that country or that region that gets you a step closer, but not actually representative of what's happening in your supply chain. So now if you add actual facility data collected on Worldly, you can reflect the work that the facility has been doing to lower its carbon intensity, perhaps lower than the grid average. And you can see that this facility is using coal power, which has a higher carbon intensity than the grid, and then you need to take action here to reduce that carbon intensity. So that's why primary data is critical. With that, you can make better, more informed decisions that drive impact and business value. And without it, you might not be making the right decisions for your business and your sourcing strategy. So just in summary, hope this gives you a pretty good understanding of what Worldly does and what the right data can do to drive positive impact. Worldly exists in a trusted ecosystem of brands and suppliers working together. We are the exclusive host of the Higg Index that is developed and maintained by Cascale and the industry standard for measuring and communicating environmental and social impact. And then more than just data, we offer decision-ready insights that go beyond reporting and compliance, so helping teams improve performance. And then through our product impact suite, which is utilized by a lot of our academic institution partners, we provide real product level intelligence that can apply to every design, sourcing, and sustainability decision that goes into creating, sustainable products. So whether you're a student or an educator, or you find yourself working at a brand or a manufacturer, we'd love to stay connected and explore how to support your goals. So thank you so much for your time. And I will hand it back to the ESRAP team.
Thank you so much, Charlie and Rachel. I found this incredibly insightful. So I will check in with Connie. Do we have any questions from our audience? No, we don't. So we'll leave the chat open if you have any questions, but maybe our educator panel has some questions that you'd like to ask. Does anyone have a burning question they'd like to ask Charlie or Rachel? Connie?
Okay, so my question is about the information. So does a manufacturer, when a manufacturer is looking for a fiber or a fabric, they go to the fabric supplier. Do they ask now the fabric supplier where that cotton was grown or where the polyester was made and where it became a yarn and where the yarn became the fabric? Do they have that information? Are more people asking that so that they can give the information to you?
I think that in terms of, going through those traceability exercises and gaining information deeper and deeper into the supply chain, that's where supplier engagement tactics come into play. So the tier one facility that's assembling the product may not know exactly where the cotton was sourced. So that's why it's so important to start engaging your suppliers early so that you can start progressing further and further down the supply chain. So in short, oftentimes extended value chains are opaque and difficult to see into, like I was mentioning. It's important to use best practices that have been cultivated over, decades in collaboration with Worldly and Cascale to, go deeper and deeper into the supply chain so you can achieve that information. But when it comes to materials, the Material Sustainability Index is the largest and most utilized database of materials LCA data. So understanding, the different processes that go into manufacturing a material, I recommend that if you don't have visibility into your extended supply chain, then modeling your materials using that database is probably going to be the best source of information for understanding the impact of those processes, those material production processes.
Thank you.
And then just to add on to that, as I mentioned, pre-competitive collaboration is what Cascale was founded on. And so the idea that this information can be shared, through members attending our annual meeting, or we also have the forum event, which is coming up in Colombo in Sri Lanka the end of this month, actually. Next month. That those provide opportunities for that type of connection and those types of conversations about sourcing.
Okay.
So is there another question in the question? I think there's a question in the Q&A, so let's address that first.
It's from Lily Stamitz in the Bay Area. What are best practice questions for retail buyers to ask vendors to support sustainability?
Charlie, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, it really depends. I would say it really depends on your goals and your ambitions as a retail buyer. That being said, the facility tools that have been developed by Cascale, the Higg Index tools, they're quite comprehensive. So it's not, just a short questionnaire. It does take time and resources to complete the assessment, but for good purpose because it's very comprehensive. It It captures quantitative and qualitative values about sustainability performance. So, yeah, I don't think I have a great question or a great answer about what are the best questions to be asking your vendors or your suppliers, but I can say that the Higg Index tools are very comprehensive and would likely address the most pressing topics that you would want to be asking your supply chain.
And to add on to that, and to really add on to what I said previously, because my answer was incomplete for Connie's question, is also, I should have highlighted Cascale Connect, which is our proprietary platform for Cascale members. And that's exactly the place that someone could drop that question and get some feedback and input from other members.
So in other words, I think I know Lily. So Lily is a buyer for hospital gift shops. So she's wanting to ask her vendors that she wants to buy from for the hospital how they are supporting sustainability. So we are directing someone like that to ask the vendor to be a part of Worldly or Cascale?
I think that to use the Higg Index as a source of truth for data, and then potentially, depending on who that organization is, to join as a member to access those pre-competitive collaborative member opportunities. Charlie, would you agree with that?
I agree. I now that I have more clarity, I would recommend that you ask your vendors to buy into a shared standard so that you're not completing duplicative, performance assessments. Like I was saying, a lot of brands and retailers, when they're just starting their sustainability journey, they're collecting data from their supply chain using spreadsheets. And from the supplier side, when they're getting multiple requests from different brand partners, different retailer partners, it creates a very large burden on them to be filling out these duplicative assessments or these audits. And it's by rallying around the Higg Index and these shared standards, it's do the work once, share it with as many partners as you choose, and just reap the rewards of that standardization, like benchmarking and peer comparisons and areas of opportunity that get recommended on platform by the Higg Index methodologies.
How does Cascale or Worldly verify the information that the suppliers are giving?
So I can start there. We have a robust verification program, which is, you can find out more about all of this on cascale.org. And I'm from the communication side, right? So I always see what's the potential to share here. We are working on a series of public facing reports that will kind of give a better window into verification, the process, the impact on the industry. And those are forthcoming this year. But you can learn more about that at Cascale. Charlie, do you have other?
Yeah, I think you touched on it. Our robust network of verifying bodies is a great value add to the ecosystem. So I would also recommend that you do a little bit more learning on some of the resources that Cascale has published.
So yeah, I think I also want to continue with this question. So the set of the question, the Higg Index, what I remember, obviously it was a long time ago, was a question more like a self-reporting format, right? You're reporting about so now, if I understand correctly, you have other third parties that do the verification of the data that is being self-reported. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have a verification program that works with verifier by bodies. And that is for the Higg FEM primarily. Okay. There's also verification through the FSLM, but that is done through SLCP. So Yeah, a little bit of a complicated network, but the goal really is verified data, which I think, Charlie touched on the importance of that, which I'm sure we're all aware of.
So, so maybe I'll just have another question since there's nothing in the Q&A. Oh, Virginia, I think I was waiting before, so I'll go first. So, you know, when we think about like all the educational institutions, I don't know, obviously everyone is not a part of Cascale. What do you think are the barriers for institutions to join and be part of it?
So I think from my perspective, and this is limited, to my experience is limited. I don't work in the stakeholder engagement side of Cascale, and I don't manage our affiliate program, but I did speak last year at FITM and had some conversations in that process. And it feels like, we, and I think Worldly and Cascale are really committed to this, could do a better job of clarifying like how to access the tools and what the relationship is between the three of our entities, and how all of that how all that can be accessed. I think so I think that would be the short answer to the question.
Thank you.
Yeah, to remove any barriers that may exist, I do want to make the audience aware that we do have different subscription packages that academic institutions have available to them to get access to the Higg product module and Higg material sustainability index. Like I mentioned, I know that there are several institutions out there that do use it as a teaching resource for students in on sustainability tracks or looking to work in consumer goods industries.
And is the MSI still open source for up to 3 materials, Charlie?
I will have to check and get back to you on
Well,
that.
it was up to about a year ago. I do know that. But it's an amazing opportunity to have your students go on and just go through the LCIA, the impacts from what Connie was talking about, from where the fiber was grown, if it's a natural fiber, how it's processed, whether it's bleached or not, before it's knitted or woven into fabric. And, you can click that and it's like a Russian doll because you see this one number. And when you click it, now you can see all the life cycle areas of the material that you're measuring. And it's a really good activity to do in a class with students. They would first have to map it backwards before they could do that. Even if they have to guess, it's a really good opportunity for them to compare and contrast fabrics in your classroom or whatnot. Can I also say something that is really wonderful for students? Thought-provoking conversations always occur if you let them just dig around the FSLM, which is the Facility, Social, and Labor module. They start looking at questions, and because at least in my experience, we have a majority of female or students who identify as females in the room, and they're reading questions like, do you have to take a preg? Do you make your garment workers take a pregnancy test first? And all of these things, and they're going through realizing all these complexities and issues that they weren't even aware of, right? So it just really does lead to great conversations in your classroom. Just exploring, even though you can't always use the FSLM because you're not a facility, right? But you can still explore, and discovery is amazing.
I mean, that's such a great point. And I think
I do it all the time.
I mean, that's amazing. And I think also that our hope, you all are training this next generation, right? And so we want to make sure that the impact of these tools and this collaboration is felt and seen by that group of students. So that's amazing, Andrea. Thank you.
Virginia, did you have a question?
Yeah, hi. Thank you. My question was related to how we can have access to some of the reports. I think you said that they were the MCAP. You showed one, I think, for Bangladesh. that I'm thinking must have been reporting out a lot of valuable information. Is that available at all for educators?
Absolutely. So if you will go to cascale.org to our publications section, you can see this series of reports, including we call them the country reports. And those really began the generation of that series of reports, which continues throughout 2026, was that analysis in late 2024 that identified those impact areas. And so our next report, which is on Sri Lanka, will be dropping during our forum, which is in Colombo, Sri Lanka, at the end of March. So yeah, you'll see that one too, but there's several. We also just did a report that might be interesting, which is basically using HIGFEM data analysis and some new slicing of that to develop a report called the State of the Industry 2026, which looks at decarbonization progress in specifically the apparel, footwear, and textile industry. So Cascale and Worldly are now broader than just that industry, which we're all talking about today. But this is specific analysis of that data. So that might be of interest as well.
Thank you.
Sure. And then one more thing on those reports, actually, because we just dropped one last week, but we also regularly do public-facing reports on regulation and legislation. So we have the most recent report is on water regulation, global analysis of water regulation, which might be of interest as well. And that's.
And if I may say, I feel like I'm your salesperson. You also curate other sources of information from many different resources and have them on Cascale. So it's not just your own reports. You're I feel like it's curated information on impact reduction and whatnot, articles being shared, etc.
Yeah, we are trying to share relevant stakeholder news regularly. So whether that's on our social channels, or we also have we have two newsletters. One is member facing.
On the newsletter,
right? So you're probably getting the member facing one. There's also the industry newsletter, which anyone can subscribe to, and those pieces that you're mentioning, which would be stakeholder related, those are all shared out on the industry newsletter, as well as those public facing reports. So
everybody watching can get that.
Absolutely.
Nice.
That's part of our mission, is really to to be a convener and also be an amplifier of this work.
I think these reports are really, like a rich source. I had not explored these, but now I'm looking at it and it could be a good resource in depending on the course, so very valuable.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's the kind of stuff that I have the deepest fingers in. As you can tell, you ask me about comms and I'm like, okay, let's talk about that for an hour. Ask Charlie all your very detailed questions. That's what he's here for.
Right.
And the country reports, I'm thinking that how amazing that is for when thinking of sourcing courses, and so so that would be that's amazing.
Yeah, and I think one of the takeaways, from the State of the Industry report on decarbonization is really to encourage, maintaining sourcing commitments. This type of analysis is not designed to say oh, you should go over here. Absolutely not. The only way we solve this is if we commit and support our supply chains. And so that's something that we want to emphasize. Those individual reports are not, a deck of cards.
How do we get the information on the supply chain more into the hands of the customer? In terms of, that the tag on the garment just says where it's made. Well, we know that's just the last place of production that put together the garment. It doesn't have any of the supply chain information. Is there any way that we can get more of that information to the customer?
I can tell you that there are several regulatory frameworks that are stemming out of the European Union at the moment that will
Right,
soon
right.
require that
That's
environmental
correct.
impact, traceability, recyclability information be publicly accessible to the consumer at the point of purchase. Um, that's going to require that, you know, brands, retailers, manufacturers undergo quite a bit of
Right.
primary data collection and just internal work. So I know that that's top of mind for a lot of our brand and retailer customers at the moment, but I think that to answer your question in short, we will be seeing that relatively soon.
One of the podcasts that might be really interesting to you is the interview with Andrew Zenny, who is the founder of Nobody's Child, which is a brand, but also founded Fabicus, which is a really interesting, oh my gosh, digital passport generating company. And I think that's, Charlie, that's kind of what we're talking about, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, that's what's required. How does any of this fit into SB 707, the legislation that's passed in California? That's the extended producer responsibility. Do you see Worldly or Cascale helping with that or not? And what, as I'm an advocate for that, I'm just trying to get the connections from you. Either of you?
Well, do you want to speak to the MSI and then I can probably speak to the advocacy side, Charlie?
Yeah, when it comes to specific regulations, I really would defer to the Cascale policy team. Yeah, I would love to get back to you on that question, Connie.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and I think, historically Cascale has been focused on EU policy because EU policy was moving faster first. And so our policy team is based in Brussels. That's really where they've been focused. But we now have a America's based policy initiative and also APAC region. So we are moving towards a broader perspective and leadership on that exact question. I am in California, so I am equally invested. But yeah, that's and a lot of that policy work is, as I said, public facing. So there is information in our newsletter. There are reports that are published. So I think you can see where these pieces are announced if you kind of follow us on those platforms.
Thank you both.
Sure, thank you.
So we're at the 2-minute mark, and I didn't realize it would go so quickly, but I wanted to give you a chance, Rachel and Charlie, to say anything if you wanted to speak to educators or students or the value of using these tools for the next generation of, those that are going to be leading the fashion industry. What's the value of it? If they can speak to it in an interview or put it on a resume, like what does that mean when someone sees that based on the companies you've worked with?
Charlie, you want to start?
Yeah, I can say just I know that the Higg MSI, the Material Sustainability Index, is widely used across different academic institutions, and I loved hearing the plugs from you all on this panel. It was fantastic. I also want to call out that it's continually growing and continuously being updated through industry submissions. So what you see in the Higg Material Sustainability Index today, it will be there tomorrow with more materials data. So if you get yourself access to the Material Sustainability Index and maybe allow your students to play around in there to do some material modeling, that's going to set them up with, best practice skills on how to use industry standard tools that will help them in their future careers in apparel and fashion sustainability industries.
Yeah, and I would just echo that by saying, that it's wider than just apparel, right? So I know this is the group of students that you're talking to, but those students nobody has a path like this anymore, right? So those students might go to different places, they might be doing different things. So definitely consider the resources that we shared, Cascale, Worldly, also just, the Higg Index in general, like that can be, I think, something that evolves as your career evolves and accompanies you across your journey, and supports the continued evolution of this industry.
Wonderful.
These industries.
Wonderful. Rachel and Charlie, thank you so much from
Thank
all
you.
of us at ESRAP. This has been a wonderful conversation and updated all of our knowledge about what you do and how everything has evolved over time. So thank you again. Really appreciate you joining us today.
This was amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
See
thank you,
all soon.
everyone.
Thank you, everybody that joined the ESRAP panel. We're very happy to have you here, and continue to join us on LinkedIn, ESRAP on LinkedIn, and that's where you can find out more about our post or becoming a member of the organization.
And I want to thank Lily and Sarah for their excellent questions. So thank you.